Okay. Good Wednesday. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, good morning or good night, depending on where you are in the world or when you're watching this. Anyway, we're live on Wednesday. What is today? May 17th of 2023 with this week's episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Shidoshi Miller here from Warrior Concepts. And so we're just going to jump right into things, right? So grab my big old fat marker, right? The way a lot of people talk online, go right along with my fat head and my fat gut. Anyway, all right, we'll just keep on going. All right, so this is kind of a part two from last episode. Last episode, we talked about kata and some considerations and whether or not they work for real self-defense and how they position and all that kind of stuff. But the topic for this one, right, is what's missing, right? What's missing from kata that you absolutely must know and develop if you're training for right? Real world street self-defense. Okay. So if you need to get caught up on some of these things, you can check out the last episode. If you're on YouTube, right? Just on the channel, hit the live button there in the menu bar or however your layout is, right? And find the one from last week. Okay. Just subtract 7 days from what I just told you. Anyway. All right. So we got a couple of pictures up here. We'll refer back to those here in just a bit. But the first thing I want to do is take a look at framing kata, right? So up to this point, we've talked about how kata are tools. They're kind of snapshots, their potentials, their moments in time, their possibilities, right? They're these training frameworks that do a bunch of different things, right? They teach you a lot of the same things that a master warrior would know and is trying to convey, right? It's an example of how they would do things, right? They're bad habit breakers, all kinds of things, right? So what I have for you today is I have a list of 10 things that are not written down with the kata that are absolutely, I think, are absolutely important when it comes to training for real life stuff. And we're going to have to develop those skills. We'll talk about why they're not written down, right? Why these things aren't even there, okay? But the first thing we want to do is frame, right, what kata are, okay? So I know in the previous what kata are. Okay. So I know in previous episodes, like the last one, I listed some of these things, or not some of these things. I came at it from a different direction. Right. But I did mention some. We'll recap some. We'll add some other ones. Right. So 3 big ones at the moment and probably a bonus one, depending on how I decide to describe it and lay it out. Right. So kata are is there, if you know what crib notes are, okay. Sometimes they're called by other things when I was growing up and in high school and college and things like that. They were called crib notes, where you could get this summarized version of a story or a play or whatever it was that you were studying, right? And then there were these basically bullet points, right, of important pieces in that work, in that piece of literature, in that play, Shakespearean thing, whatever it was, right? So they're reference points, right, that are key pieces, right, of this strategy or this tactic, okay? But that's what they are, right? A lot of people think that if they get their hands on the scrolls or the densho or whatever, again, we'll talk about the difference here, that they're gonna know all the magic, right? And it's just not true, okay? It doesn't matter in what form these densho or list of kata or whatever come in, right? They're very, very abbreviated. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? So what else are kata, right? Katas are reminders, right? These bullet points are reminders to those whom the lesson was already passed on to. Teacher taught it, demonstrated it, walked them through it or whatever. And then here you go. Here's this name, again, another reference point, right? With this little outline, but it's a reminder, right? It's oh yeah, that one, you do this, this, and this, right? This one over here, they look almost similar, but in this case, you do this, this, and this other thing, right? So it's a reminder, right? It's not supposed to be a textbook, right? Right? What else are they, right? They are, and I talked about this in the last episode, they're examples of a lineage's, right, or a school, whatever you want to use there as a term, of a lineage's principles, concepts, basically their approach to handling a situation, right? In the Bujinkan, we have 9 schools that Hatsumi Sensei, my teacher, had Soke-ship over, right? Which means he was head of lineage, right? He had Menkyo Kaiden and I think somewhere between 100 and 150 other schools that he learned from the age of 5 all the way up. So talk about a Picasso for his time, right? But a lot of people just look at these things and go, wow, man, that's a lot of techniques. Yeah, but if we just look at the 9, that's 9 approaches to handling a similar problem, a similar context, a similar issue, right? That also means that there's 9 different approaches to staff. There's 9 different approaches to sword. That just, again, if we just focus on the 9 that Hatsumi Sensei had Soke-ship of, and I know they've been divided now, broken up just like they were before his teacher, Takamasa Sensei, got him. So it kind of historically did this, and now it's doing that again, okay? So anyway, all right, so again, they're not supposed to be like the end all to be all, but I was introduced to the concept like the kata that are known as Kihon Gata, right? Kihon, fundamentals, right? It's this basic movement of creating space, evading, neutralizing what he's doing, capturing him, and then delivering kind of a single action follow-up, like Ichimonji no Kata, Jumonji no Kata, Hitsu no Kata, those kind of things. From the Gyoko Ryu, all schools have them, even if they don't identify them as such, right? It's this basic thing. So what I was introduced to was you get really good at this thing, right? And then in sparring, we were required to be able to do that piece, right? Well, but herein lies the problem. How do you know when? How do you know what type of an attacker that's designed to work on, right? What specific pieces are you supposed to know that make this something that could shut this whole thing down very, very quickly? Okay. And that's where understanding more than just the moves, understanding the focus or the principles and concepts, what I call the magic, right, within each lineage, right, comes in handy. Okay. Knowing, right, why we're hitting Uko or we can hit a substitute, right, because it does the same thing, right? These are knockout shots. I have a video short or a couple of them up on YouTube where I'm doing this, we call them egg beater techniques, right? Where this punch comes in and you're shifting and then coming in. It looks like, I don't know, you're countering, and then coming in and basically you're creating an opening and then hitting the side of the neck or hitting the side of the head, right? The temple or the facial nerve line, right? And the number of people that are just like, that won't work. Because they only think in terms of Western boxing, right? You hit a guy right here, man, or you hit a guy, right? To create a knockout. That's how you knock somebody out. No, there's lots of ways to knock somebody out. You can hit them on the neck, right? This uko is really, really important. There's places on the torso that you can hit them that will literally knock them out, and it's not a headshot, okay? So, but understanding that, people that studied warfare for well over 1,000 years might know something more than some egghead, right, that got into high school fights and fights the same way today, right? Because that's the way everybody fights, right? They might know a little bit more when they had to deal with armor. They had to deal with different clothing configurations and things like that, where if you can't hit the chin or the chin's armored, right, how do you do your knockout, right? Anyway, I'm not going to go down through that, but okay. So here's where this little drawing comes in. I don't know how much detail you can see. Now, I drew this one as a booklet because very often they show up that way. Other times they show up this way, but I wanted to do a differentiation, okay? So one of these is called densho. The other one is called makimono. Maki means a roll or something rolled, okay? So when people say scrolls and that's what they think of, right? It's this kind of configuration. Sometimes the densho, right, come like this. But again, I wanted to make this differentiation between the two, okay? So here's that extra, right? We'll call this bonus or whatever, right? Okay. So kata are lists in the densho, right, but they're actually reflections. They're examples of the magic, right? That's described and laid out in the makimono. So the makimono has kind of the real juju, right? That's the philosophies and all these secrets and whatnot of the school of that particular lineage, okay? But it's written out very often in code, okay? The densho are what most people are used to seeing, especially in the Bujinkan or in Ninjutsu. You get these kata lists that are just plastered all over people's websites, or you got these lists that you could download and print out and whatever, right? Okay, so often they're just a list of names. Sometimes they're a list of names with those bullet points, right, as they would be laid out in the densho in whatever form, booklet, or I've seen them both ways. Okay. But these in and of themselves, they really don't tell you how this school is different from any other school, right? And later on, that's going to be important in the very, very upper levels, especially for my students, because they're going to be required to do the kata of one school using the principles of the other 8. Okay, remember 9, Hatsumi Sensei, whatever, okay? But there's lots of other ones, right? Most people don't understand that a lot of stuff that they take for granted that they call Bujinkan comes from schools like the Musashi School or the Manriki School or the Itoryu or whatever, right? So, but either way, right? Because now it's not about the moves. It's about understanding how those moves are applied. What angles are we using? What's the timing? What are we trying to catch, right? Because the secret is the stuff that was very, very closely guarded is the stuff that was different than what everybody else was doing. Because the reality, again, comes down to if you fight like everybody else, it's an uphill climb, right? Or you've got to be bigger, faster, stronger. You have to have the advantage because if you fight like everybody else and this guy that you're facing has fight experience, then he's been there. He knows what you're doing. He's already expecting it, that kind of stuff, right? So you can't fight like everyone else. So I love it when people post, on these videos that would never work. Everybody knows that you fight like da, right? You just keep on doing you, Bubba, right? So you just keep fighting like everybody knows and don't give yourself any kind of an advantage over size and strength, which is going to diminish with illness, old age, all that kind of stuff, injury, whatever. Okay. So anyway, so the bonus here is that kata, right, are their lists, right? The kata are examples. I already have the examples here, right? But they're, oh boy, let's see. There are a bunch of these things, right? So they're reference points, right? That highlight this stuff, right? There are all of these things, right? That show up here. But without the makimono, without that school's secrets, it's kind of like without the right fuel for the vehicle, that vehicle might operate, but it's probably going to sputter and spit a whole lot. Okay? And it might not operate at all. Okay? Ego likes to reduce everything to things that are really, really simple, right? It's either this or it's this, right? The number of students that I've shown something to or shown a video to, and I'll say, okay, what do you see? And they go, well, it's pretty cut and dry, right? You're doing this, this, and this. And then I'll say, why is the rear hand where it is in that technique? Why is it in this technique over here? Why is the rear hand there, right? Why is the alignment? Why is the weight distribution what it is, right? Everything changes, okay? So these are outward manifestations of the strategies, the tactics, the principles, the concepts. Again, what I call the magic of what is supposed to make them work, okay? So the question is, and again, there's another video, I think it's a Whiteboard Wednesday, that I outlined my 0-point system. And it's just something I came up with to kind of formula or to make it easier for Western students to get this stuff that, teachers teach all the time. But I wanted to give them a framework to make it easier to learn, right? And, on that, I mentioned it in the previous lesson, but on that, right, you have a given technique, you have a given kata, right? anything that's on the 0 line, right? There's a whole bunch of lines below it, negative, right? It doesn't mean bad, right? It means these are all the pieces, all the things that we have to get right to be able to execute the kata as transmitted, okay? As a model, as an example. And then all the lines above it, right? All these plus lines that I have, right? Or all the things that I have to have right for that kata or the pieces of it to be street ready. So how do I make Ichimonji no kata street ready, right? How can I use it in a sparring kind of thing, right? So there's a bunch of things they're just not listed in the densho, okay? When a kata is laid out, right, it will say something like uke tsuki, right? So that says that the person playing the role, the training partner, right? And sometimes instead of uke, it'll say teki. Okay, teki is the word for attacker, right? And that's important in training as well. At a certain point in your training, you need an uke, somebody who is a sympathetic training partner who's helping you with the learning process. At a different stage in your training, you need someone who is good at playing the role of a teki, an attacker, right? Who will apply the right amount of resistance, or they will evade, or they'll catch you making mistakes. Because the trick isn't learning the techniques and then just fighting any way you want. The trick is to be able to learn the techniques so well that you can deliver them, you can execute them correctly on a training partner who knows what you're doing, right? One of our instructors, Shoshi Paul, he passed away just a few months ago. He used to laugh when I demonstrate something, and he'd laugh during a technique, and people would look at him like he was crazy. And he'd go, no, I know what he's doing. I know the lesson. I know the principle. I know the concept. What makes me laugh is that the moment he's doing it, the when, the where, the timing, that kind of thing, I can't stop it. Okay, and that was something that was introduced to me very, very early, pre-black belt, right? That the goal is not, okay? Once you understand that, it's easy to trick the guy on the street, okay? The trick is to trick the guy that knows what you're doing, okay? So anyway, all right. But the idea here with those densho and makimono, I probably shouldn't have erased them, but without the two, you only have part of the equation. And a lot of Western students like to do guesswork, right? And I was in that part a long time ago. And the reason I dropped thousands of dollars for 2 weeks at a time going to Japan and training with the master teachers is because I know that in there somewhere swimming around, there's still misinformation. There's still assumptions, or there's still like at a certain point in my training when I thought I listened, there was a bit of misunderstanding. Like I thought I knew what he meant, but right. And so I go over there. People think it's kind of crazy, but I don't go over there to get rank. I don't go over there for them to tell me how good I am, which is what ego wants. I don't need to spend that kind of money to go over and for somebody to tell me, yep, you're doing great. Why bother? Why bother going? Right? Well, no, unless it's ego stroking, no. Okay. Why do I go? I go to hear no a whole lot, because without no and mistakes, I don't get the correction that I can jot out, bring all that shit back here, and then get back to fixing things, right? So anyway, all right, so what I have for you today is a quick list of 10 things that are not part of kata descriptions. They're part of kata. Understand what I'm saying, okay? They're not part of the kata descriptions, but they are a part of what the kata are conveying, right? There's a lot of things that are implied, or they're going to be passed on in some other format, right? As long as we can break our habit of going, yes, sensei, because they're just talking and we want to get to action, right? Right. So anyway, they're not a part of kata descriptions, but these things can and should, right? Again, my opinion, right? My show, my opinion, right? They can and should be a part of your training so that you can have what the masters who put these things down, right? What they had, right? Because I think what people are often missing is that the masters didn't just pass down a bunch of techniques. The masters pass down how to think about the problem, how to assess. There's a whole bunch of mindset, right? Strategic thinking, right? Tactical thinking that is in this as well, right? But if we're only looking at the moves because that's what ego it gets entertained by, then, how are we any different than somebody who's just doing ballroom dancing or whatever dance you prefer? Okay. Anyway, all right. So we whip out my handy dandy notes so I don't forget anything. All right. So again, hate when that happens. Okay, so not in kata descriptions. Okay, first one, right, is the committed mindset. Okay, the committed mindset. I remember one time I was training in Japan, and we weren't at Hombu, right? We weren't at the headquarters dojo, and we were training in Atago. If you've ever been there, they stopped training there a bunch of years ago because since it was getting older, and they made some strategic changes. But the Budokan in Atago, right? A Budokan is different from a Taikukan. Right, a Taikukan is like our YMCA's. Okay, so there's basketball courts and whatever, right? And then there's one or more Budokan, which are these places for practicing martial arts, right? But a Budokan, right, is a facility for nothing but martial arts. So there could be a tournament stadium, and this one there was full bleachers and all that kind of stuff, scoreboards, whatnot, right? There was a Kyudo run, right, for practicing Kyudo archery, right? There were these matted areas, all that kind of stuff, right? And Hatsumi Sensei weekly rented one of these spaces. It was huge, right? Because we had all these Westerners who would come for class and all that, right? But anyway, I remember we're training, and through the translator, he stopped everybody, right? Because everybody in class was fairly upper level. And again, he kind of dictates how he teaches a class based on well, actually, in the earlier days. Later on, if you weren't 10th or 15th done, find somebody that could translate for you, right? But what he was pointing out was, everybody's doing the technique, and mechanically you're okay, right? But there's no juice, right? There's no juice. I don't mean you need to go fast and hard, but his point was, I can look around the room and 80, 90% of you, there's no commitment. I don't get a feel, even though you're training slowly and softer so you don't hurt your partner, I don't get a feel from you like you're actually in a real engagement. And this is where a lot of people get this stuff wrong, right? They think that you have to go fast and full on, right, to actually have that kind of thing because you're actually trying to beat your partner down. No. And this goes to the guys online as well, right? I just can't take you seriously, dude, because you're not going at speed. This stuff is designed to break a human body down as quickly and as efficiently as possible so it doesn't function. And that doesn't mean that you kill them, but I don't think people are either they don't know what they're asking for, or the way they train and their fight mode, they're used to hitting people a whole lot, waiting for that knockout or whatever. But if you're landing multiple shots to somebody's head and they're not dropping, which happens a lot, right? Or hitting them however you're hitting them and they're not dropping, I would say there's something wrong with your punching. I don't care how much power you think you have, right? Where's that power directed? Right? That's why we learn Kyusho, right? A lot of people translate as pressure points. We have a whole Whiteboard Wednesday on that, right? At this point, we have almost 70 episodes. Jesus Christ. Anyway, but Kyusho doesn't mean pressure point. It means weak point, right? So we're attacking the weak points of the body because the point is you need to shut them down as quickly as possible. Okay? If you've ever seen the movie The 300, right, about the Spartans, okay, all the battle scenes are kind of silhouetted, right? These guys are running through, an opponent comes up, and what they do is they lop off a leg or an arm, or they might behead them or whatever, but they just keep on going. And if there's a sword check or weapon check or whatever, it's like one, maybe two, and then, right? Because they don't have to wait, right? There's not 15 moves. There's not even 3 or 4, right? If I lop off somebody's wrist, not only do I disarm them, but he's going to bleed out. If I lop off his leg, I don't need to behead him. I don't need to go after all this kind of stuff, right? What I need to do is render him ineffective so I can move on to the next one as quickly as possible. In a self-defense situation, I need to render this guy incapable of chasing me down as quickly as possible so I can get the hell out of Dodge. Okay? But people confuse that with a competitive bout where we're going to be fighting for 2-minute rounds, 5-minute rounds, 10 times, 3 times. It's not the same. It's not the same. Okay? And I know people would like to argue that it is, but I don't argue. I don't argue those points, right? Anybody that's ever been in those kind of situations and understands the difference between combat and contest doesn't argue those. I don't argue those any more than I would argue my 3-year-old grandson's perspective about what I might need to do to fix the car or the engine in my car. I don't have conversations with people like that. I smile and nod and let them think that they won something. Okay? Because I'm not here to re-educate him. He's not a student. Right? Just in case he comes at me. Okay? Anyway, so, all right, so committed mindset, right? Am I training, right? In the beginning, right, we learn the moves, right? We do this thing, right? And everything is, because we're focusing on how to move, right? But at a certain point, we need to be moving like this guy's, I'm waiting for this guy to come in, and the adrenal response is doing its thing, and there's like little hedging footwork, and there's the joints and the muscles are doing a certain thing, and right, and I'm looking for that perfect moment. Okay, I'm not chasing things down just because the kata says so. I'm not, right, but a committed mindset. Am I committed to winning against an attacker trying to beat, break, or kill me? Or am I trying to get to the end of the kata? It's 2 completely different things. Okay? All right, number 2. Right? Again, right back to reminders. Okay? Tactical awareness. Okay? What is tactical awareness? Okay? So, most people, when they're training with a training partner or they're doing the kata or whatever, okay, they're only focused right here, okay? They're not paying attention to other things around them, right? And I know that because sometimes I watch people practicing and they're bumping into people, or they're bumping into the wall, or they're tripping over things or whatever. So in my classes, sometimes I'll just walk around, and I'm not just walking around to watch what people are doing, but I'll walk really close to people to see if the student who's defending or attacking or whatever will adjust their angle, because if they run into this person and a stumbling occurs, it's going to throw them off, and now they're set up, or right, they could knock this person down, trip over whatever, right? Okay, so here's the thing, right? What or who else is around you, right? Because people get off focused. Again, in a sport contest, how many people are around you, right? There's the attacker in front of you or the opponent in front of you, and who else is in the ring? The ref. That's it. That's all you got. And the ref's not getting between the two of you unless he needs to break something up or whatever. Okay? But the reality in the world is this guy may be coming at me, but I don't know what kind of allies he has around, or what kind of good Samaritans are going to come in because they turned 3 seconds too late to see him throw the first punch, and they see me deliver something, and they translate that as I'm the bad guy, he's the good guy, and here they come. And as soon as they start to pull me off, he takes carte blanche and finishes the job, right? What are they going to do? Apologize later? Okay? So what or who else is around me that I'm going to have to navigate around or pay attention to? Okay? This goes to meditation. We don't have time for that during this this training, but let's keep going. Okay? Number 3, okay? Training to understand a sense of, I'm going to paraphrase this, right? a sense of best, right? What I mean by that is, what's the best time to move? What's the best time that counter strike, that uke nagash, should land on that incoming punch? What's the best time for your strike to land on them? Again, most people stop at the 6-year-old in the sandbox, just going as fast and as hard as you can. And I get it. It works, right? But it's only a couple of steps outside the cave as far as caveman fighting goes, right? And you can win, right? But there's a kind of a, what do we call it? The Holy Trinity, right? Effective, right? Yeah, one, okay, what you did was effective. Was it efficient? Okay. Did you do it with the least amount of energy expenditure on your part, least amount of wear and tear on your part? So once you effectively downed this guy, you got steam left for his 2 new friends that are coming off the bar stools. Okay. Effective, efficient, right? And effortlessness, right? Effortless. Okay. Does it look to everybody else like you didn't do anything? Because if it looks or feels like you're working, you are. And if it feels that way, you're cooking off a shit ton of energy. Okay. But don't ever forget, right? Just because this is over doesn't mean the self-defense is over. Even if you're the kind of guy who's just icy cold and you don't have to worry about, shame or guilt or whatever, because you've just been in fights and you put down these fuckers because they're just whatever, right? Maybe phase 7 in our 8-phase framework doesn't kick in. You don't have to worry about those kind of things, okay? But you might have to worry about jail time, okay? Because you have to worry about what the witnesses think they saw, because that's what they're going to tell, okay? That is another self-defense and survival instructor online that I just became aware of likes to say, if you can't keep 8 guys or 10 guys out of your butt in a prison shower, okay, maybe your philosophy is not broad enough, or you don't need another kata or 3, right? You need maybe some other strategies and tactics to make sure that the end of this self-defense situation, hours, days, weeks, whatever later, doesn't land you where you've got a whole different self-defense situation in a shower, prison shower. But hey, that's just the way I think, all right? Because I don't want to be there, okay? Number 4, okay? You need to work the Kyonopo principle. Okay? Kyonopo principle. Most people in the Bujinkan, in Ninjutsu, know the Kyonopo as this set of 8 techniques, okay? But that's mistranslation from Japanese, and the Japanese instructors have modified the way they describe things because of the way most Western students want to think about it. So they don't call it uke nagash, receiving, or what it is. They use the term blocking. Why do they use the term blocking? Because we use the term blocking, and we won't stop or go beyond it. So it's just an expedient. It's not their problem that you don't understand it or that we don't understand it. Okay? It's like knowing Japanese etiquette. You're going to Japan to train in a Japanese dojo in a Japanese martial art, right? They don't bother teaching etiquette. That's a senior's job to pass, talk to other people. Sometimes they'll kind of lean over and tell somebody, hey, that's a don't do kind of thing, right? And then they have to put up with the glare of indignation, right? How dare you tell me whatever? No, sensei didn't say that I had to do that. It's not his responsibility. But he has said, if you're going to Japan and you're training in Japanese martial art and you're training in Japanese dojo, even if you're not in Japan, right? It's your responsibility to learn the culture and the etiquette, not his job to teach it. It's called personal responsibility. It's called being a grown-up, okay? Being a student doesn't mean being a child, even though there's some crossover, right? So anyway, what we're doing is creating variations. So this points to understanding the principles and concepts that give any kata its name, okay? So the way the Kyonopo principle works, right, is being able to do on one level, it's being able to do a kata in 8 directions. Okay. Usually with I would say 70% or better of the techniques in the Bujinkan, right? You're taught to go naname, right? He's coming in, you're moving back at an angle, right? But if this is me, let's get rid of these little squiggly lines, all right? And let's trade color. And instead of thinking about these as lines of movement, right? Well, how the hell am I going to do the kata in like all those other lines, right? The guy's coming in from here, right? Because that's what most people assume. He's coming in from here because they only ever train 2-dimensionally, right? But what if he's coming in from that direction or that direction or that direction or that direction, right? What if the direction he's coming in on, you're facing that direction or that direction, and he's coming in from the same or a different direction? Now what's your angle? Okay? Can you do the kata in any one of 8 directions? That's the superficial version, right? The other version is that's the kata. So I'm going to make 8 variations of that kata. And then I'm going to make 8 variations of each variation. Then I'm going to make 8 variations of each variation. The point being that the original kata now becomes just a potential, a variation within it, and ego loses the holy sanctity of the official style and whatever, because we understand the principles and concepts for controlling a fight: timing, distancing, angling, kotsu, the essential nature of how I'm controlling the bubble, how I'm controlling his decision-making, perceptions, and all those kind of things that are not written down in the kata. All the kata are is he does this, you do this, you do this, you do this. Ta-da. Okay? The hell does that have to do with a fight? That's why most people believe that you can't do kata in a fight. And why most people who try to do a kata in the fight without understanding the full gamut lose horribly. Okay? All right. So the other thing, right? We're only halfway. The other thing that's not here, right, in the densho or the description of the kata, right? The assessment skills you're going to need. Okay? The assessment skills. Okay? Am I reading the situation, right? What's this guy's commitment level? How's he, whatever, right? Okay? Well, all I need to know, man, is he's trying to punch me or kick me, and I'm just going to finish this. Okay. Okay. This bleeds into the next one, but what we're looking at is, like, what kind of fighter is he? How does he posture himself, right? How does he hold his hands? Because this guy is coming in very differently from this guy, okay? From this guy, right? And the squaring off, this guy, right? The shoulders rounded in this way, as opposed to being up and back, right? They move differently, right? What does that tell you? Okay? But there's other parts in the assessment, okay? Appropriateness and all that. Anyway, this leads to the next one, which I call operational, excuse me, operational context. Okay. Just like in the military, right? When we're on an operation, a mission, whatever, right? What's the agenda? What are we trying to accomplish? Because if we're in a peacekeeping mission and a round goes off, we're in defensive mode. We're going to do minimum necessary to quell things and to get people to disperse. But if we're in an active campaign to take territory, to conquer whatever, we're going to put barrages out in front. We're going to, the small arms fire now is just going to clean up the mess as we move forward, right? It's very, very different, right? But again, this depends on assessment skills, right? If we're not good, assessment skills are like being problem solver, right? If we don't stop to understand the nature of the problem, then we're just always going to do the same shit. Okay. You know the old saying, if all you have is a hammer, then every problem is a nail. Okay. Fix a cracked window with a hammer. I just mentioned this last night in a class, right? You better be okay with a well-ventilated house. Okay. And again, most people don't want to do this kind of stuff because they don't want to have to think about it, right? Fighting is easy, man. Everybody's just wired to fight. Everybody knows how to fight. I get it. But that's why this is called enlightened self-protection and not quote XYZ style of fighting. Right? So operational context includes things like the environment you're operating in, right? Okay. So most people don't get out of a big open sterile area. Okay. Whether it's a dojo or their backyard, or they go to the park, and what do? They mill around, find a good flat, even space where the grass is nice and puffy so they don't have to land on hard, rocky stuff, right? They don't have to worry about tripping over roots, whatever, right? What about in between parked cars? What about in your freaking car, okay, where you can't do your cool footwork? You're not ground fighting, but you're not standing either, right? What's the environment like, right? If I'm in a restaurant and some jackwagons come in or whatnot, I've been in restaurants where there's lots of space between the tables because they're isolating customers so that they're not like inundated with conversations that are going on at every other table. And in other restaurants, holy shit, I'm pretty sure they're violating fire code. But man, is the food good. Okay. But where am I? What do I have to deal with? Okay. Am I on loose stone or a wet tile floor as opposed to something that my preferred footwear, right? Here's a story for you. And this goes to clothing too. So let's write this on here, right? Clothing, mine and his. Today's Wednesday, right? So tomorrow and Friday for this month, and it rotates every month, we have what we call street clothes days, which means people don't come in their martial arts uniform. They're supposed to dress in whatever they wear to school, whatever they wear to work, whatever they would wear out jogging, whatever. And I always tell them, don't always wear the same stuff because people will gravitate toward comfort, right? Oh, I can do martial arts and that stuff. Yeah, but is that what you wear? If you're a lawyer, is that what you wear into court, right? If you're an office worker, if you're a UPS delivery guy, right? Is that really? Okay? You wearing socks or sneakers or whatever, or are you wearing steel toe boots? Are you, right? So wear those things because that's going to matter, okay? A bunch of years ago when I was a military policeman, this guy who always got in trouble, right? He was a soldier, always got in trouble, right? But man, he liked to dress GQ when he was out in public, right? He was off and going out. And every time he went downtown, got drunk, got shit-faced, whatever, got in trouble, just didn't think ahead, right? So either that or there were lazy MPs before that with search positions, okay? So I put him into a search position, right, up against the wall. We were in a building, not outside, okay? And his feet, his shoes kept sliding on the tile, right? And I had to have somebody else put a boot behind their shoe so he wouldn't slide backwards and his face grind down the wall, okay? Well, he was blaming me, not my fault. You got yourself in trouble. You're wearing smooth bottom shoes, right? And you know every weekend there's a good chance you're going to end up in this position, okay? Yeah, but you could like ease up on the search position. I could, but then I put myself at risk because you can come off that wall. And if you come off that wall and we tussle, I've got a weapon you can get at. I got multiple weapons. No. Okay? But here's the thing. He helped me out. Because if he decided to become a jackwagon and get threatening and come off that wall, all I had to do was move my boot and he was going to slide right out on the floor. Okay? Are we doing the same thing? Okay? So street clothes days allows people to train and practice the same skills they learn in their comfy pajamas, their martial arts uniform, right? In their everyday clothes. And that way they can tactically and strategically make adjustments so they know, right? Okay, I've got to, right, be aware that if I'm wearing these kind of sneakers on a given type of surface or whatever, right? Or sometimes they actually change their choices, their footwear choices or whatever, okay? I know I did. When I buy shoes, I don't care if they're dress shoes or whatever. And I mean, they never look like they're modified, right? But the first thing I do, I take them off the shelf and I flex them to make sure that I can walk with my feet moving in a rocking chair run kind of thing, which is proper walking. So I'm not walking heavy footed and then my ankles get tight, and you get the idea, right? Okay. So clothing, what else is in here, right? Attack and attacker type. I'm just going to put these on the same line. Okay. Attack and attacker type. Okay. So you do your kata, but can you do, it says against a straight punch. Can you do it against a hook punch? Can you do it against a tight hook, big old flailing haymaker, an uppercut, one of these ground and pound kind of things, something coming in from a Thai boxer kind of guy, whatever, right? Can you change that up? What about the attacker type? Okay. Is this guy just balls to the wall flying in at you and speed shots or whatever? So how do you do that, right? How do you play this stuff out? There's at least 5 different attack types, at least 5 different attacker types based on psychology, build, those kind of things that we play around with. Anyway, okay. Appropriateness, right? Appropriateness to any given situation. Okay, cool. You love that kata. It's your favorite, right? Meanwhile, you're out with your family, your wife and your kids, and you're going to duke it out with this guy, but you inadvertently trip over your kid because you didn't take into account that when the child panics, he grabs your leg and holds on because he needs protection from daddy, but you're busy trying to do business, right? Or you're taking your attention off your family and you didn't realize this guy had a friend who's now over punching your wife into the ground or whatever your situation happens to be, right? Okay. So is it appropriate, right? Same kata. Am I a civilian? Only has to worry about the self-defense doctrine. Am I a military guy who can work the kata because it's a battlefield thing, right? Or am I a cop that not only has to worry about self-defense doctrine, but use of force doctrine and departmental policy and all those kind of things, right? Is it appropriate to the situation? Okay. I need to be able to pick and choose these things based on what I need, right? Okay. Situational timeline. Situational timeline. What that means is, right, am I training with the kata the way most people do, which is like it's the only thing, it's the ideal, right? He throws a punch, I wipe the floor with his ass, we call it a day, right? That's everybody's fantasy, okay? But that wasn't what was implied in the scrolls. What's implied in the scrolls is something came before this. And what you did was you caught that particular punch. You had an opening and you were able to do this thing. So you executed. Okay. There's also this other implication. I try this thing and it doesn't work at the end and something will come after it. So am I practicing the kata as is? Am I practicing the kata as the beginning of the fight, but something goes on? Am I practicing as the middle of the fight, but something goes on? Am I practicing it as the end of the fight, which is back to this again? Okay. Situational timeline. Okay. Anyway, right. And this stuff is wired into a lot of the kata. Okay. We just have to understand what we're looking at. Okay. And when a lot of these people translate these things into English translations, right, they start with the attacker throwing the attack, but there's some things that are often written right before it. One of those common things is a kanji for jiu. Jiu means it's not really formlessly adaptive, but it means that something came before it, right? And you're catching this moment. So you train with him doing a bunch of different things and you're just avoiding or evading, right? Or you could do another kata, and at the end of that kata, it fails, causing him to throw this thing that leads into this kata, right? Same thing. This kata could be the thing that fails and then whatever, right? Because that's just life. That's the way shit happens, right? Life is messy, and fights even messier. Okay, so okay, so hopefully, right? So let's just keep on moving, right? 4 more. We'll zip through these things because we're about out of time here. I apologize. This took too much time out of your life, right? Because you want to just see some moves, man. I got the pajamas, right? Anyway, right? Number 7. right? What's your emotional state? This goes back to assessment skills, and it goes back to operation state, emotional state. Okay. Your emotional state, your emotional drivers, your intent, right? Your needs, your fears, all that kind of stuff, right? Why are you choosing this approach, right? Are you already this way? So one of these techniques that are bladed and whatnot, really, it's going to work, right? Or you more like, so one of these things, right, are going to be more the appropriate thing, right? Or do we just pick and choose because, well, I like that technique. It's like my favorite, right? Well, you can die with your favorite. Fantastic. Okay. I hope it all works out. Okay. Number 8, right? Even back in the day, legal ramifications. Right? Just like the Old West and the Wild West movies and stuff, right? We get this glorified fantasy about like gunslingers and these samurai who, the law allowed them to cut somebody down and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that might require a little bit more research to understand that, there were certain types of punishment if you chose poorly, okay, in your actions, right? But what are the legal ramifications of me doing this thing? Okay, because if there were none, shit, we'd all carry swords. Okay, as soon as he balled up his fist like he's going to punch, done. Okay, in today's world, boom, done. Okay, except it's not the way it works, right? Okay, number 9. Related to this, but not the same, right, are karmic ramifications. Okay, karmic ramifications, right? Besides legal, are we considering revenge on his part, right? Okay, loss of family members, mine, okay, due to their fear or the fact that they detested that action that I took, or whatever, right? Because while they felt safe because they believed I could protect them, they witnessed the monster coming out. And now I'm living alone with half my shit, and my family doesn't want to talk to me because they don't feel safe around me, even though they should, because we don't have the same relationship as I had with this guy who was trying to beat, break, or kill me or one of them or whatever. But, okay. So, which is why we teach use of force. That's not in the scrolls. Use of force is not in the scrolls. That's another legal thing right here. Okay? In today's world, we have to show that self-defense doctrine requires that we can show or articulate that what we did was the minimum necessary to stop the violence. Because if we exceed that, we're going to jail for attempted murder, aggravated assault, or murder, or manslaughter, or whatever. Okay, it's just the way it works. Okay, you're guaranteed at least in the States here, you're guaranteed trial by a jury of your peers. If you think that if I defend myself, the jury box is going to be filled with law enforcement, security professionals, military, and self-defense experts, you're high on crack, because that's not the way it works. And anybody that runs around with this dumbass cliche, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't want either to happen, okay? Because if you don't understand trial science and how both of those attorneys are trying to stack that fucking jury box to get the answer they want, they're only looking for the win, okay? You don't understand, okay? And after going through that kind of hell, you might have you might have maybe opted for the carried by 6, okay? Because again, if you lose the trial by 12, you're right back in that shower room with 10 guys in your butt involved, okay? Anyway, 10. Oops, 10, okay? Are you training the kata? Again, I just mentioned these different things that went with legal and use of force and all that, right? The difference between battlefield back alley, fight for your life kind of thing, or law enforcement officer restrictions, security guy, bouncer at the door, right? Family or a friend, right? I'm at a family picnic. Uncle Bob has had a bit too much to drink. I don't have an Uncle Bob, but you get the idea, right? And I'm just trying to quell things, and Uncle Bob decides he's taking a swing, right? Aunt Minnie's probably not going to be happy if I send Uncle Bob to the hospital. Okay? Everybody may have thought Uncle Bob was an asshole. But if I hurt Uncle Bob, you'd find very, very quickly how much Uncle Bob's the loved one, because I didn't have to hurt him. Right? So how do I do this in a way that controls Uncle Bob but doesn't hurt him? But if I'm in a back alley, I'm not doing soft training shit. So when this guy's coming at me and trying to beat, break, or kill me, I can do to him what I wouldn't do to Uncle Bob. Okay? Use of force and intensity, right? So there's 10 of these things, right? Okay. So again, this goes back to, I mean, a lot of these things overlap, right? Differences in force or intensity. Again, these guys that comment online all the time, man, everybody knows you just fight as hard and as fast as you can. Okay. Well, you do you, boo. Okay. So anyway, right? There's the link again, right? This Friday's virtual training. We're going to be taking a look at a kata or two and integrating some of these things, right? Some you're going to have to work on your own. We can't do all that in a 75 to 90-minute class, but we're going to jump around with a bunch of these things and look at these different considerations, okay? Space and intensity and all those kind of things, right? So, but the point is, right? How do I fill in the gaps, right? Because again, why are the kata just bulleted notes? Most people, they take a 21st century Western belief system, which includes a whole bunch of assumptions, and they try to overlay it over a 13th, 14th, 16th century foreign land, right? Okay. Well, dude, I mean, just write it out, man. Why couldn't they just write it out? Well, because all paper was handmade. And that made it extremely expensive. And all ink was handmade. You made it, right? During our Chinese New Year's parties, I hand make ink with a soot stick, right? It takes me a half hour to 45 minutes to make a batch while students are watching. Most don't watch for the whole 30, 45 minutes because it's freaking boring, right? But I make this ink, right? It's not just like pouring something into a dish, okay? And then I can only make so many kanji art pieces and whatnot because that's going to run out. And then I need to make more. Okay. So paper's finite, ink is finite. You write down bare minimum because you're, again, what was one of the things in the beginning? You're only going to pass it on as a reminder to a student about something you already taught them. It's not supposed to be, again, it's not supposed to be a textbook. It's not supposed to be a how-to manual. Okay. So the more we get this, the more we do a couple of things. The more we understand what's being conveyed, the more we understand what we have to do to make sure that we're working the process correctly. And the other thing that happens is we stop getting into bullshit arguments with people who don't know any better. Okay. One of the new memes I just posted, this reminder popped up, and I can't remember if I wrote it out 3 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, but I just refashioned it. And it says, the highest form of ignorance, right, is dismissing something you know absolutely nothing about. Okay? So let's not be those people, right? That's what I have. Hopefully I'll see you during this Friday virtual training. Hopefully some of you that have been doing virtual training for a while, one class at a time, right? You'll take me up on that special program I have where you can double up on the number of classes and get feedback and all that kind of stuff. That link is on the page as well. If not, no harm, no foul. But these things are designed to be high-level strategy and tactic things that you can lay over whatever it is that you're doing on your end, whether you're in Ninjutsu or you're in Taekwondo. It doesn't matter what you train in, right? But hopefully this serves you and is of value, and it continues to do that, right? If I don't see you on Friday, hopefully I'll see you next week for that episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. See you later. Train hard. Talk to you soon.